more MacBook Neo analysis, and a Mac Studio configuration loss. This is MacVoices. The MacVoices Dispatch is our weekly newsletter about all things MacVoices, from the week's shows to Chuck's other appearances to the week's best MacVoices magazine articles. The Dispatch keeps you up to date. Sign up now at macvoices.com/newsletter. Another article I wanted to throw in, and this is always one of those things that, let's see. But this particular article from Lifehacker points out that the MacBook Neo outperforms some, and they're in the article, M-series MacBooks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, that's fine. I know just pre-show, in fact, I said I was going to save it, but pre-show, someone brought up the fact that at least one influencer is out there saying, well, I'm doing Photoshop tests on it. And I just want to smack them because this is not a Photoshop machine. And everybody wants to tear it down and say what it can't do. And that's why, I've been looking for articles that say what it can do, because it's kind of obvious that this is not going to be a machine that renders. Now, Marty, having said that, I know you and Rankin gave you a challenge about video rendering. Do you have anything to report on that?
No, I haven't. I did see some reports that people had been doing video rendering with it. When I get the machine tomorrow, I'll put on a 4K 5-minute video and see how quickly it renders down to a 1080p. That's the challenge that Ewan gave me. I don't think this is a Photoshop computer. I think it's a Pixelmator Pro computer because it's part of the Creative Suite, and I think that's where that is going to be a primary use for particularly college kids.
Yeah. Well, even when Ewan gave you that challenge, it's like, okay, sure, test it. Why not? But don't have any expectations because that's not what this machine is built for.
Yeah, I know. I don't have expectations for it, but I also go down and get a cup of coffee, and that takes me 5 to 10 minutes to brew anyways. So I'm not going to worry if a 5-minute video takes 4.5 minutes, whereas it's almost instantaneous on my studio.
Yeah. Mark, performance comment.
Yes. So I've viewed over the past 3-4 days different well-known reviewers who are talking about it, and they're sharing sort of their maybe 5, 10, 15, 20-minute experience at the Apple Experience event last week. And it's interesting if you just listen to their voice tone and cadence compared to what they normally do, they're stuttering and they're uncertain. In other words, they're at a loss for words for how to talk about the performance of this thing. That's maybe a combination. They don't have direct hand-on experience. And then the other thing is, I think they're just dumbfounded, and they say, oh, well, it might be good for doing email and, and surfing the web. Well, the phone in your pocket from 5 years ago is great for those things. So, I think that the thing about all these performance, improvements is unless they're, and this is a carryover from the Windows world, and Intel and the race on gigahertz, unless there's bigger numbers to prove it's demonstrably better and worth buying or more money, when it comes to qualitative factors, in terms of does it get your job done? Can you watch your YouTube videos? Can you have another tab open, for doing other things? It's subjective. It's like wine tasting. It's like women's figure skating. There is really no hard factor. And since a lot of these reviewers don't test in depth all these other things, they really don't know what to say. And so they get into sort of this the idiocracy of just looking at numbers. Well, for most people, you've had more than enough gigahertz, and your processors there are just waiting. Give me something to do, Marty. Throw me a video at it. I'll do my best. I may not render as fast as your studio, but I'm sitting here running at 3% capacity forever. Give me something to do. So it. And that's why I think Apple is focusing on the price of this thing, because people understand price compared to looking at something from Dell or HP or Lenovo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Because all of these devices for general use, unless you really are going to be editing a Photoshop file with a good ginormous number of layers, or doing really 4K, 8K video rendering tasks. That's not the point. This stuff will work admirably for you. And I think I'm just reminded what I thought was the numb stupidity 10, 15 years ago, when we all remember the first MacBook Air, and I bought one because I loved it. So, it's really great and light. And then they came out a year later, with an SSD, and guess what? Oh my God, the gigahertz went from, if memory serves, from like 1.6 to 1.2, and all these famous lions, and this week and this, that, and the other thing, and saying, oh, this is going to be absolute dog. Well, guess what? It had an SSD in it, and the SSD made up more than compensated for the performance of getting data off of a slow spinning mechanical drive. So since then, I figured the mainstream media reviewers, they just look at numbers. They don't have any common sense when it comes to understanding that overall system performance is a balance between your memory speed, your memory capacity, your storage size, your storage speed, and Apple has really been leading the way at making very highly performant devices. So, I think a lot of people are going to be out there. We'll be seeing in 2 weeks. Sure, I'm predicting we'll see these mea culpas. I thought there was going to be a steaming pile of what, and it's really great. And I think this is just a testament of Apple, and their leadership at balancing all of the dimensions that lead to high performance systems. So, I remember, what was it? Steve Jobs says, "Oh, well, we can't ship. We just don't know how to sell something for $500." Well, with advancement in Apple Silicon, they're finally at the point where they can do that.
Let's see. Brian, I think you're up next.
Okay. Yeah, kind of to echo what Mark was saying about, looking beyond the numbers. I think of this computer being targeted a lot of times to folks who aren't necessarily looking at those, high numbers to begin with. They're really looking at that price point as an entryway to get into the Mac ecosystem, I think is key. When you think of, a lot of the, whether it's checking email or watching videos, as a consumption end, going to websites, doing, word processing, minor computing, this is a really an ideal computer, really, in that way. But I think even more great than that will be those who are people who might be wearing an Apple Watch, people who might be wearing or using an iPhone, but may not have the laptop or desktop Mac yet. And it'll introduce them or reintroduce some folks into being able to really take advantage of different aspects of, being all encompassing in that Apple ecosystem and some of the benefits that come with it. When you consider, being able to look at to go back and forth with your messages, being able to type it out on a keyboard, using iMessage, just things that, many of us who are, have a Mac already might be taking for granted. This might be an opportunity for some of those who do not have a Mac yet, to be introduced to those, nice little nuances. The iPhone mirroring, the continuity with regards to copy and pasting, from your iPhone onto the Mac, just things like that. I think that's key. And the numbers are there, and it's not a weak computer by any means, but it would be, of course, for certain tasks. But I think for the target market of what it's going for, it's really a good deal.
Eric?
find there are a lot of people that try to make an iPad and a keyboard into an inexpensive computer for email and browsing and note taking, and it works, but it's a little pricey on the higher end, and isn't quite as flexible as an actual computer. The other group of people are I'll just use a Chromebook and everything is a web browser and that's good. And then they discover that the machine doesn't have a very long lifespan and it expires or just is so slow that it's really untenable. And they're the people that live off of their phone. They do everything from the phone. You can remote into another device and remote control it. You can do your email. You can do your video editing. Nothing is, this is my sole job. I don't video edit 8 hours a day or 14 hours a day. I video edit long enough to put a 5-minute clip up somewhere, and it just needs to get through it. And if it takes 10 or 15 minutes, so what? Maybe give me a keyboard and a bigger screen because it's faster than typing with my thumbs. And this is the answer. It's the nearly perfect machine that is not so expensive that you can't afford it. It's perfect. It is the next thing after a phone, or the next thing after a phone and a watch, or AirPods, or it lets you build out the full Apple ecosystem for a reasonable amount of money.
Okay, Dave?
Yeah, I want to go back to we could talk a little bit about where it's going to be sold. Walmart, we talked about that. They had that M1 MacBook Air. This is going to be a better performer than that, from what they're saying. It's also going to be something that's going to sell crazy. And all the big retailers, like, probably wouldn't be surprised. Target's going to sell, Walmart, and a lot of the the big retailers when it comes to that. So that's something that's something that's, I think, is going to really push the sale of this laptop. And then Marty and I have been having many discussions about the education market. I mean, this is, I think, the biggest reason why I think Apple did this is, that they want to get back into the education market. They wanted this Chromebook mess that's been going on for years I'm hoping this is going to make a big change. And like you said, Marty, that your university is going to be seriously considering them too. So, I mean, $499 for in the education market to buy an Apple MacBook Pro, a MacBook Neo, and is just unheard of. And I just think that's where the market's going to be with this. And in addition to, I think Christmas time it's gonna be crazy selling. I wouldn't be surprised can't keep it in stock. But on the other end of it, here's many of us on this panel probably wouldn't want to use this MacBook because of its performance. But why not? Like I'm going to be curious to hear what Marty and Eric have to say once they start using it. I was tempted by it. I had it purchased and then I changed my mind. So, being I'm going to be getting an upgrade to my Air and my MacBook Pro. So, but I'll definitely be interesting to see what you guys say.
Webb, you've been quiet for good reason.
Yeah, well, yeah, tornadoes have a tendency to do that to you, but I'm fine. I'm fine. The sirens turned off and everything. So, I have not bought a Neo. I do not plan on buying a Neo, but I think it's a fabulous machine. Just from what I've seen and heard, there are a lot of naysayers out there. I don't agree with them, but like you said, this is not meant to be a Photoshop machine. Okay, this is not a $500 Photoshop rendering device. But I could see my grandson and going into that route with him, and I could buy it for him. I really like it. I understand what they're trying to do is try to even out and really kind of expand the market that they have. Anyway, I'm impressed with it. I don't intend on buying one. I'm holding out to replace my MacBook Pro, and I'll probably do that later in the year when the M6000 comes out or whatever they end up calling it. So, but I'm impressed with it. I'm impressed with the position, the market positioning that they're trying to do with it. I think it's a great idea. So,
Eric, you made a comment. I really want you to point that out. I think that's a really interesting perspective.
It is, I think, the perfect gift machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Come holidays or the start of school, the start of a semester, the start of a course, somebody that's going to be extended stay in a hospital recovering for a while, all the places where I would have tried to get them to ask for a loaner iPad, this is a good option.
Yeah. What do you think the chances are that they would bring special edition Neos out around Christmas in red and green?
Possible.
There's always a case.
Well, Chuck, I was going to get you your own Apple Vision Pro, but it looks like Neo is going to be more in line for you now.
Oh, darn. I wanted to point out one other thing, that this was an article, and this to me just is so Apple, that with the Neo, it'll warn you if you plug a display into the wrong USB-C port.
Yeah.
Now, look, maybe the warning is that the display doesn't work, but pardon me, I kind of doubt it. I think there's something there, and that just says that, okay, Apple's recognizing they put a limitation on one port. They're going to make sure that you don't get frustrated. And
well, even if the warning is the display doesn't work, that's very valuable.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Because it's telling you why it didn't work.
And also presumably what to do, plug it in the other port.
Yeah.
Presumably,
so
but
we don't know, but that just feels like something Apple would do. The Apple we all know and love.
Yeah, I'm going to try and
used to.
I'm going to try and field test it when school starts up again. We're on spring break, and so next week I'll have to do some presentations and classes, and I'm going to bring the Neo with me to see if I can hook it into the monitor or the projector that we have. And yeah, I'll be honest with you, I'm bringing my other laptop with me in case it doesn't work in our school system. But if it does, then, there's no reason for me not to carry that as my to-work computer, because I'm going to do video rendering and things like that here at home. I'm not going to do it when I'm at the office, the time that I'm at the office.
So Marty, what do you carry on a regular basis, and would you replace it all potentially with a MacBook Neo?
Oh, I would never replace everything that I'd carry on a with a MacBook Neo. Here's my philosophy.
I'm asking about what you carry from your home to your office.
Yeah, usually it's my 15-inch MacBook Air.
Okay.
There are cases when I just feel, because our university classrooms, the hookups vary from classroom to classroom. And sometimes I feel better with my MacBook Pro because it's got the HDMI port in it, and that works fine. My philosophy about this is, if a new piece of tech comes out, some people will go, well, do I have a use case for it? Sort of what happens with me is, if I get the tech, I find the use case for it.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm more excited about finding where that fits in sort of my workflow and my productivity. That's the fun of discovery for me.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're not looking to limit, and cut down by a certain number of pounds or a certain percent the amount of stuff you have to carry every day.
When I travel, when I conference, I'll take a computer with more push, more pull, because I'll probably need it when I get there.
Mm-hmm.
Before we get off the Neo, because we've been on here for a while, but I wanted to point out that this article, that there was a change in Apple's management page, or leadership page, excuse me, and the Neo designer, Molly Anderson, is among the new faces listed there. And there was another article that I didn't bother to capture the URL on, that apparently some of the new management personnel are much more design oriented than have been now for a while. So maybe we can get away from some of the things we've talked about here, the questionable design decisions that don't seem to drive function or form. They just seem to be off the wall. And we've done the Allen die discussion, so we're not going to go there. But I just think it's interesting that somebody, that has hit this home run, or one of the people on the team that hit this home run, is now on the leadership page. I think it bodes well.
Sounds good. Let's see what happens.
Yeah. But Mark, you brought up something, and I wanted to go back to that and just touch on it for a second. And that is, I'll let you do it. What do you think this means for the overall Apple health and the health of the Macintosh?
Great question. I think what this means is, we're seeing the benefit of Apple, controlling their own silicon and their own devices and their ability to drive down, the cost curve. And I think what this means is this broadens the available market, for Apple, where before maybe there were people in the $600 to $1,000 range, or $1,100, $1,200. These are fuzzy boundaries, but who might have been interested in Apple, but they just say, "Oh, I just can't pay that much. This damned Apple tax and all this other stuff." That I think this is going to turn a lot of heads, and maybe now we're just seeing the start of the pebble dropped in the center of the pond, and it's going to ripple out over the next 6, 9, 12, 15 months, especially once we see an update to this product. So I think if I were Intel, I'd be worried if I can't get my 18 process going, so I can start to manufacture AI chips or other things, because I think this is just going to trigger Apple's share of PC market from wherever it is now, for 12, 14%. I think they could easily double their share of the market, just because they're now at a much more attractive price point. And as we all know, you have the long life cycle ownerships of reliability and cost and retained value, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, of Apple devices. So I think this bodes really well for the future. And hopefully this panel can get together and in 2 years or 3 years, when we can see the second and third iterations on the MacBook Neo, because what we've seen with Apple, since they've taken control of their processors and working with TSMC, they haven't been burdened by the technical problems that Intel had, because they bet on the wrong lithography and manufacturing process technology. They've really charged ahead, and I'm interested to see what happens. And I think, and again, I think for corporations where they're very sensitive to capex, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I think this is a big message, combined with topics we've talked about in the past about how big companies like I think IBM or Eli Lilly, and et cetera, they talk about the lower cost and reduced IT support costs by going to Macs and moving away from Windows 10 or 11 or whatever version of PCs. So I think this is a fundamental turning point for sustained general market PC growth for Apple, and hopefully some of the analysts will pick this up in the next 2 quarters and realize that they're not just an iPhone company, that they have other sources to grow in the mainstream PC market.
Anybody have any other thoughts on that, on the overall impact to Apple? Great. Webb.
I just thought it was interesting that as we go through the leadership change, their new senior vice president and general counsel, Jennifer Newstead, is relatively new, and she came from, of all places, Meta. So I thought that was Meta. I thought that was interesting. We were saying, that Meta was stealing so many of our engineers. We got their lawyer.
Yeah. And
Okay.
boy, has she had a lot of experience.
Yeah.
And good for her.
Yeah.
And all joking aside, all the big leaders in the tech space, they're all filled with smart people. Okay. Even some people that we think are egomaniacs, I still think they're smart people. So good for her. I hope it's a great move for her, and she's very happy at Apple where she's been. So
Yeah.
that was my
Agreed.
only comment. So
No, and it's a good one. It's a good one. Frankly, I had missed that, so that's good. We're not done with Apple news, not by a long shot, actually. Apple's 512 gigabyte Mac Studio vanishes. A quiet acknowledgement of the RAM shortage. I read this and it's like, okay, maybe, but I'm not quite buying it because I can't believe that Apple would hesitate to put some crazy price on it if somebody came and said, I really want to buy a 512 gig Mac with RAM. And so I just think that was just, it was too far up. It was not selling. And so they decided to pull it down. I can't envision a world where Apple would say, no, we're not going to do this.
I think you're right, Chuck.
Counterpoint.
Sorry. Yeah, Jim first. What'd you say, Jim?
I was just going to say, when I saw that story, I had the exact same thought as you. That seemed pretty unlikely.
Yeah. Who else said? Mark, I think you were.
Yeah. At first, I thought like you, Jim, and you, Chuck, and then later on, I came to realization that Apple seems to set price bands for their products, and it doesn't seem to be their nature that if costs go up dramatically, that they will distort their product line price and offer something dramatically higher to the end user. So I wouldn't be surprised if it comes back. And again, I was thinking about sort of 512 versus 8 megs for a lot of Neos. That's do that optimization. That makes a hell of a lot of Neos available. So I think this is a rational response to supply chain constraints.
Mark, I know I went exactly where you went too, thinking about it. But still, the profit margin on a $599 Neo. If Apple wanted to, they could just name their price, because anybody that's in the market for a 512 gig Mac Studio is going to be able to afford or willing to pay whatever they need to pay to get it. So
apparently, that configuration was $9,499.
Yeah, it was around 10K. Yeah, I agree, and I think. But again, I think, okay, yes, they might be able to shell out for it, but you trade that off against your reputation. And do you really want to be accused of, jacking up prices and, extorting exorbitant amount of money? Because people are not going to think about, RAM being more expensive. They're just going to think about Apple. This product went from 9,900 to pick a number, 1,700. So I think Apple has reputational damage, which is more important to them, than maybe the de minimis number of units of the 512 that they sold.
Yeah. Webb?
Reputational damage.
I was just going to add, just stay tuned to this channel. I think that they'll backfill it. Maybe not next month, maybe not until the end of the year or whenever they refresh the studio, which I'm pretty sure is going to be coming. And I'm sure that they'll probably have some. But the Mac Studio is kind of the new the new Mac Pro, except you don't have to spend $100 on wheels for this one. So I think this is just a short little interruption. So
visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page. And get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you Mac Voices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.